Hi everybody, this is Anthony. Welcome back to my show. I do really appreciate everyone who's subscribed and certainly everyone who leaves comments and clicks the like button. As I mentioned in a previous video, my goal with my channel is to eventually get it monetized. To get monetized on YouTube, you need to have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of view time within a year. Because of my DB Cooper videos, thanks to you dear viewers, I have well over 4,000 viewed hours required. My subscriber count currently is 564, so I still need about 436 more subscribers to go. So if you haven't already subscribed, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, and it does help me out. Now, if you're concerned that I may be getting too rich off of my channel, here's a screenshot from Social Blade, which tries to analyze YouTube creators. It isn't always very accurate, but as you can see, it estimates that my monthly income from me posting nearly every day, which can take many hours of work, would likely yield between $4 and $71. And again, this is per month. And again, I'm not monetized at this point. Anyway, even if you don't subscribe, I do appreciate you watching this. Let's jump right in. Again, I often take these in the order of most recent so that it's just easier for me to go through my emails and address the message. This states you can't trust Wikipedia. Let's think about this in a wider context, at least in the context of everything we know about DB Cooper. As I point out, in many videos, we don't know much. And by that, I mean we don't know much about facts that everyone agrees on. I've done videos where I address using historical data on the weather conditions of the night of the hijacking, what the temperatures and rain was like in various places in the area that Cooper likely jumped near the Columbia River. However, I can't tell you how many people I've had argue with me that they said that the weather was much better than I allege. Again, I show the weather.gov site where you can look up historical data from various weather stations in the region. But if the weather facts do not jive with what people want to believe, then people are going to argue with me and just ignore the facts and believe counter-arguments. There are many people who believe that Cooper did not jump out in the Pacific Northwest, but bailed out right before the plane landed in Reno, or possibly jumped out and rolled out of the aft stairs unseen by all the law enforcement who would be there waiting for the plane. Well, I think most people do not believe that to be true, but there are people who argue with me or who posit that it was. There are people who sincerely believe that there was no skyjacker, that this was the air crew plotting to easily steal the ransom money. Again, not something that is believed by most people, but actually believed by some. There are people who do not believe that the tie belonged to Cooper. They believe that it was from someone else. I point out that for it to be sitting on the cushion from someone else before Cooper got on, somebody had to have left it there accidentally. The air crew, which walks through the airline looking for things that people left behind and picking up napkins and plastic cups before the next round of passengers arrive, did not notice a black clip-on tie sitting on the seat. Cooper, by coincidence, gets that seat, evidently sits on the clip-on tie, which would be uncomfortable because there's a metal mechanism in the knot of the tie that would not be comfortable to sit on, but rather he ends up sitting there for 4.5 hours and then gets up and departs from the plane. How likely is that? I argue there's just about a 0% chance, yet some people really believe that that's what happened. So how does all this tie back to Wikipedia? Sure, Wikipedia is a venue where anybody can put in their own information or change things, but they're supposed to have live links of a particular quality for each fact that they put in to the article. And you can look at the edit history of all those edits made to an article. So if somebody keeps on changing an article and puts some crazy information in it, and other people remove it, you can see what's going on, and you can also see what links, if any, that connect the information on Wikipedia to another website or news site or book, etc. And then you can go to that site and judge for yourself if what it's presented is potentially accurate or inaccurate information. So is Wikipedia 100% accurate all the time? No. But is Fox News 100% accurate all the time? Is MSNBC accurate 100% of the time? How about CNN or ABC or CBS or NBC News? Have you ever read the newspaper and seen something that you knew was factually incorrect? I think one will find that no matter what their source of information is, there's going to be potentially inaccuracies. But the good thing about Wikipedia is if people see inaccuracies, they can go and change them, which you can't really do if the television news reports something inaccurate. If you look at the Wikipedia article on D.B. Cooper, does it push a particular candidate? No. If you look at a book on the D.B. Cooper case, most of them are pushing a particular candidate. Do they point out evidence that usually tends to exclude the candidate? Often they do not. Anyway, you should take all sources of information with a grain of salt and look at their sources. Whether it's the real McCoy, whether it's Wikipedia, whether it's Dan Gryder's documentary, or whether it's my videos. Again, thank you for your comment. Here's another comment concerning a person who evidently is a retired professional wrestler who has a YouTube channel where he mentions on more than one occasion that he knows the name of D.B. Cooper and that the person died fairly recently in Arizona. I've watched one video by this gentleman, which was literally just 8 minutes of him saying that he knows who it is, but he's not going to say. But if the FBI asks him, then maybe he'll tell them. If you're concerned about the accuracy of Wikipedia, then you might want to be even more cautious in believing a retired professional wrestler and what he thinks he knows about the case. I'll just stop it there. Here's a good question. What happened to Vince Peterson? I just happened to look at a video that Eric Ulis uploaded recently about his further research into Vince Peterson. I encourage people to research a wide variety of sources on anything concerning Cooper, including other videos. Just to summarize it in a sentence or two, Eric believes that 3 particles of a titanium antimony alloy found on the tie connected to a research lab in Pennsylvania where a man named Vince Peterson worked. Eric believes that Vince Peterson was Cooper. I think that Eric is a sincere person and is actually contributing to the understanding and knowledge of the Cooper case. I've made a number of videos where I go into great detail concerning some of the issues I have with his conclusions. I'm not going to go into them all here, but I encourage you to look at them. They usually have titanium tie in their name. Anyway, Eric is still looking into this angle on the case, and I'm sure that if he finds more information, he'll post it. I do point out that Vince Peterson, who died a number of years ago, had at least one son, as he was quoted in a news article. I estimate that the son was likely between 25 and 30 years old at the time of the skyjacking, which was 51 years ago. Since the skyjacking took place on the night before Thanksgiving, I do not think that it's possible that Vince Peterson would have made it back to Thanksgiving dinner in 1971 in Pennsylvania. I wonder if anyone has asked the son, who would probably be between 75 and 80 years old roughly, if he remembered his father missing Thanksgiving dinner in 1971. A relative, like a parent, missing a Thanksgiving dinner is something that people would remember. If it was the case of, do you remember somebody missing a 4th of July picnic, that would be something different. But Thanksgivings are usually times when everybody in the family comes together if they're able to. Also, my understanding is that Peterson may not have had any parachute experience and doesn't seem to have any other connection to the case besides these 3 particles. So, that's a good question. Be sure to keep an eye on Eric Ulis's YouTube channel for updates from him. Let's move on to the next comment. Here, Jason, who has left other good comments in the past, is asking about the money that was found at a place called Tina Bar. And you sometimes see this spelled differently. Evidently, at some point, it was spelled T-E-N-A, and you can see that from signs at the location. Later on, new signs have the name spelled T-I-N-A. Anyway, it's a private beach on the Washington side of the Columbia River, downriver from Portland and Vancouver. In February 1980, a young boy digging a shallow hole in the sand found 3 packets of the money. Evidently, this was about 3 inches below the surface of the beach. Now, if you read up on this, you'll find some other sources stating that small bits or shards of the money was also found about 3 feet deep in the area. Each packet had $2,000 and $20 bills. 2 of the packets were complete. Another one was missing some of the bills, likely just from decomposition. The money in the packets that were found totaled $5,800 and still had rubber bands on them, although it needs to be clear that the rubber bands were in such bad state that they immediately fell apart upon touch. Some people want to push a narrative that they were in pristine condition. This is not the case. Plus, look at the pictures of the money that was found. It was extremely decomposed. How do I believe that it got there? And this is what most people believe, that Cooper lost the bag of ransom money. Most likely it was tied to him and went into the Columbia River along with him and ended up on the bottom. So if it's not clear from what I've said, I believe that Cooper did not survive, that he ended up perishing, most likely in the Columbia River. I mentioned this in just about every one of my videos, and I also mentioned that I'm well aware that I may be wrong about this. So, it's pretty well accepted that sometime about 1974, a dredging ship deposited sand dredged from the bottom of the Columbia River onto the beach at Tina Bar. The Columbia is a well-used river by large ships, and so it needs to be dredged so that the shipping lanes remain free of impediments. I've seen online details about the suction device which is used to suck up the sand. It was big enough to suck up packets of money, but too small for the body of an adult to be sucked into it. So that's how I believe that the money got to the beach. I think that it's likely that it was on the bottom of the Columbia River from November 1971 to 1974, and then was dredged up at that point. But there does seem to be slightly contradictory inconsistencies in some of these reports. And then, of course, there's Tom Kay of Citizen Sleuths, who's presented information that he believes demonstrates that the money did not enter the water of the Columbia in November 1971, but later on in a particular different range of months when particular diatoms were active. I have nothing against Tom. I think that he is doing some important research, although I point out in some of my videos about the titanium particles on the tie that what Tom has on his website to this day seems to contradict other findings about the tie, which either should be updated or explained. And I watched the presentation on a YouTube video of Tom talking about the diatoms. As I point out in a relevant video that I did concerning it, I have some issues with his methodology and conclusions. I think that he provides some interesting theories that are appropriate to discuss and consider, but I'm not at all convinced about anything that he says concerning when the money was in the water based on his research. I think the simplest explanation is the money somehow was lost in the water at the time of the skyjacking, and some of it ended up on the beach, likely through dredging. It makes zero logic for Cooper, if he survived, to go to that beach, which is not at all convenient to do, and bury the money in November 1971 or soon after that, in the hopes that roughly 8 years and 2 months later, a young boy might accidentally come upon some of the money, thereby establishing some alibi for the skyjacker to throw off researchers. And I also don't believe that Cooper accidentally lost 3 packets of money but survived the jump with the rest of the money. Again, that doesn't make any logical sense, but some people do believe that. And again, I think, as we all know, no ransom money was detected in circulation. Could it have entered circulation and never been detected? I highly doubt it, and I've gone into great detail in other videos about that scenario. Again, Jason, thank you for bringing up these important questions. I appreciate it. Big Woody is another viewer who comments a lot and has good points that need to be addressed from time to time. So thank you for your comment here. And please don't take anything that I say as an attack against you. What you bring up is similar to what I've received many, many times in the past. And I made many videos about the McCoy connection, including one on the top 5 reasons or something like that, on why McCoy is not Cooper. Just to recap, this theory comes from a book called The Real McCoy, which was written by a former FBI agent and a parole officer. And then Dan Gryder made 2 videos about it. And just to be clear, after I watched the first video, which is just technically a horrendous piece of work, I still came away convinced that McCoy was Cooper. And I posted a video about it, And then other viewers pointed out all of the problematic issues that Dan Gryder left out. And even though I was reasonably convinced, I still always have an open mind and will listen to people that have contradictory evidence to what I have. So I changed my opinion on whether McCoy was Cooper. So let's go over just a few pieces of the similarities and differences between Cooper and McCoy. What are the similarities? People point out that the two cases are completely the same. Is that true? They point out that the same type of passenger jet was hijacked. That's certainly true, but my understanding is this type of jet was the only one with aft stairs, so the only type of commercial jet that one could parachute out of. You couldn't parachute out the side door, at least that's my understanding, and I think I'm correct on that. So, is that a connection that says McCoy, who was, of course, committed a similar skyjacking in 1972, must therefore be Cooper? No, not at all. If McCoy reads about Cooper jumping out of a particular plane, then McCoy, who was a skydiver experiencing marital and financial problems and looking for a quick source of money, is going to start thinking, hey, they didn't catch him, maybe I'll do the same thing. And of course, that's obviously what happened. People point out that both skyjackers sat in exactly the same seat. I looked it up. Technically, that's not quite correct. The seat number and letter were different, but I'm guessing due to a slight difference in the configuration of seating between the two airliners, that basically it was the same seat. But let's think about this. If you had half a brain and were going to skyjack the plane like that, where would you sit? You would sit in the last row against the window on the left side of the plane. That's assuming that you're right-handed. That way, no one can sneak up behind you, and because you're in the back row, and you're next to the window so you can see out of it, and you have your right hand free to threaten people with a bomb or a gun in the case of McCoy. So that's not even a coincidence. That's logic that you would sit there. Again, doesn't demonstrate any connection between the two cases other than that is where you logically would want to sit. And about the location of the fuel truck when the plane had to refuel. People argue that both skyjackers demanded that the fuel truck be placed in the exact same position. Actually, if you read the description of how each hijacker instructed the fuel truck to be located, they are radically different in their wording, but in both cases they were located at roughly the same position. Is that a smoking gun? No, not at all. I looked up how this particular airliner was fueled, and they were fueled from the front. And usually the fueling truck is parked pretty close to the jet. However, if you were going to skyjack a plane and it had to land, and you would want to make sure then that the ground crew and the fueling truck crew are going to be as far away from the airliner as possible, because you were afraid that the FBI would dress up like them and then try to get on board the plane and overtake you. So, if you were sitting in the back of the plane, on the left side of the plane, next to the window, you'd want the fuel truck to be as far away as possible from the plane, but within a good line of sight from where you sat, which is exactly where both of the skyjackers had the fueling truck located. This just makes common sense and in no way proves that McCoy was Cooper. And in fact, the FBI did have agents masquerading as fuel truck attendants during the McCoy case, as eyewitnesses saw some of the people at the fueling truck wearing polished dress shoes while the rest of their clothing was the fueling truck uniform. And regular employees would not be wearing the same type of polished dress shoes that FBI agents in the early 1970s would be wearing. Besides the similarities that I've outlined, and possibly the fact that both skyjackers said that they wanted no funny business, which of course is what is said in every movie and TV programming before that time concerning people hijacking something or robbing a bank, that's where the similarities pretty much end. What's the biggest piece of evidence that would tend to exclude McCoy? Well, Tina Mucklow, the flight attendant on the Cooper flight, denied that the picture of McCoy was the man who sat next to her for 4.5 hours during the skyjacking. Cooper was said to be in his mid-40s, maybe as old as 50. Despite looking perhaps older than his age, McCoy was 29 years old at the time. But Cooper was described as having darker skin, possibly having Indian or Mexican blood, or being of Italian ancestry. McCoy was light-skinned and had ancestry from Northern Ireland. If you think that perhaps that was only true from his father's side and that his mother's side of the family perhaps had other ethnic origins that may have given him darker skin, you have to remember that his parents were first cousins to each other, so they were both Scots-Irish. Their eye color was different. McCoy's ears stuck out so much that his nickname, even into college, was Dumbo. In the skyjacking that he did in 1972, he wore a wig and tried to cover up his ears so that they weren't so noticeable. Obviously, Cooper's ears did not stick out, and there was no indication that Cooper had anything pinning his ears down. The flight attendant said that Cooper had no discernible accent, indicating that he was likely from the Pacific Northwest. McCoy was originally from North Carolina. He spoke with a southern accent and had a minor speech impediment. On the face of it, these all rule McCoy out. Case closed. What's other evidence that the door between these two cases is as firmly closed? McCoy was a Mormon Sunday school teacher. Do Mormons sometimes commit crimes? Sure. Obviously, McCoy committed the 1972 skyjacking. Mark Hoffman certainly was a criminal. But my understanding is, and it hasn't been contradicted as far as what I've seen, is that McCoy did not drink or smoke cigarettes. Cooper was calm, had 2 bourbons, and smoked 8 cigarettes during the course of his skyjacking. He carried out the skyjacking in a professional way, and passengers on the flight did not realize that the plane was being skyjacked. McCoy, on his flight, went into the bathroom at the beginning and changed his clothes into a garish costume, which attracted people to looking at him. Some of them realized that he was wearing a disguise in an attempt to skyjack the plane, and he had to pull out a gun and threaten certain people on the flight. He was extremely agitated, the complete opposite of the behavior of Cooper. I don't know how I can convince people who have made up their minds how different the skyjackings were. Some people argue that McCoy acted differently intentionally so that the two cases would not be thought of as being connected. I would say to those people, use logic. You can't both argue that the cases were very similar and therefore it was the same person, but then also say, well, the reason that there were differences was that he wanted to throw off investigators and therefore it was the same person. And again, to the point of the Sunday school teacher smoking and drinking. It's true, some Mormons smoke and drink. It's not physically impossible, they're just not supposed to do it. As I point out, McCoy was said to abstain from those substances. If he was Cooper and had 2 drinks to try to throw off people into thinking that he was not a Mormon for whatever reason, I could see that as technically being possible. Again, it doesn't make any sense for somebody to think to themselves, oh, I'm a Mormon, and just to make sure that the FBI doesn't start looking at Mormons for no particular reason, I'm going to have some bourbon so that they think that I'm not a Mormon. But slowly drinking 2 bourbons is different than chain smoking 8 cigarettes. I argue that a non-smoker is not going to be able to sit next to the flight attendant who actually lit some of the cigarettes for him. They're not going to be able to sit there and fake smoke 8 cigarettes for no particular reason if they were not a smoker. Somebody who is not a smoker and was going to smoke any cigarettes, especially 8, is going to start throwing up. So, simple life experience and logic says that Cooper was a smoker and a drinker, not a Sunday school teacher from the LDS church who never smoked or drank, but started to on one flight just to throw off people from thinking that he might have been a Mormon, even though they wouldn't normally assume that the skyjacker was a Mormon. And again, everything else in the cases are different. Criminals tend to commit crimes near their homes, or at least along certain routes in the case of truck drivers who turn out to be serial killers or something like that. McCoy's known skyjacking took him right to Provo, Utah, where he jumped out and where he lived. Cooper seems to have jumped out of the plane somewhere over southwest Washington or northern Oregon, near the Columbia River, if not in it. That is not McCoy's home area. Another strong piece of circumstantial evidence that separates the two cases. As far as the book, The Real McCoy, yes, I've not read it. Can I discount supposed circumstantial evidence or statements that McCoy made that are in the book that I haven't read? No. Am I open-minded in every case, even this one, where I think it's clear that the two individuals are not the same person? Yes. I'm always open-minded to it, though I'm sure some people will think that I'm not being open-minded. Do I think that we can trust anything that was reported to have been said to the authors by a known criminal who is now dead? Not really. I've watched both of Dan's videos, and it's interesting. The second one, which deals with the FBI angle, in particular on the death of Richard Floyd McCoy, really doesn't do much service as far as the accuracy and integrity of the book and its authors. The FBI agent who killed McCoy was reported by the authors of the book as stating that he had killed D.B. Cooper. When Dan Gryder asked the FBI agent if he said that, he said that's what the authors of the book reported, but indicated that's not necessarily what he stated. You know, it's interesting. There's so many people that are interested intently on the D.B. Cooper case who think that the FBI dropped the ball and they're all idiots and we're all conspiring to hide the truth. Yet when an FBI agent says something that supports a person's contention, then they're a well-respected source of accurate information. Of course, every FBI agent that has a particular candidate and a book all have different candidates, and officially the FBI thinks that Cooper is an unknown person who perished in the course of the skyjacking, which is also what I've independently come up with. And let's think about this one last thing before I end here. If the FBI thought that McCoy was Cooper, and for whatever technical reason that may or may not actually exist, they couldn't pursue the prosecution of McCoy for the Cooper skyjacking, then why would they spend any effort at all looking for Cooper after that point if they knew he was McCoy? That doesn't make any sense. They would just tell their field agents, hey, McCoy really did this Cooper skyjacking. He's dead now. We know it was him. There's no sense spending any more effort. Case closed. So, is the case closed on who Cooper really was? No. Is the case closed on McCoy not being Cooper? Yes. It's closed, but people are still not going to accept that. So let's move on to another person who believes that McCoy was Cooper. It's our old friend John Hancock from Declaration of Independence fame. Mr. Hancock previously wrote a lengthy rambling message, in part attacking my integrity, and I responded to it in my last Q&A. This here message is a response to my response to him, and here's a screenshot of it, but I've also pasted it verbatim over the course of 3 slides so that it's easier to read, just because the screenshot may not be all that easy to read, especially if you're on a phone. I'm not going to address everything he says here. I answer some of these details in my previous response to Mr. Big Woody. I would just question some of the information that Mr. Hancock presents here about McCoy working for the CIA. He has a lot of specific information. Perhaps it's from the book The Real McCoy. Again, just as I've stated a few minutes ago, and I've stated in other videos, I've not read this book, which is very difficult to get a hold of and very expensive to buy secondhand copies of. Perhaps somebody else can provide the source of these dates and other information concerning McCoy and the CIA. I would just point out that one should probably be a little cautious on such information. Usually information like this is not freely given out by the CIA for obvious reasons. I think a lot of people, whether they are interested in the D.B. Cooper case and watch my videos or just the general public, have a general distrust of elements of the United States government, in particular the FBI at certain points in history and the CIA at certain points in history. I would just like to posit to you that if you think that the FBI is lying about elements in the case, then do you still accept certain things that the FBI or FBI agents state if it tends to support your beliefs in the case? How about the CIA? I think that the CIA would admit that they do not routinely provide a lot of accurate information about classified or covert operations. So, if you think that this is an accurate statement, then why are you believing things which may be coming from supposed CIA sources? Is this information supposedly coming from McCoy before he perished? McCoy was a criminal. He was a skyjacker. Whether or not you believe he was Cooper, he certainly, no doubt, was the skyjacker of a flight in 1972. He violently broke out of prison and was on the run. He was a violent criminal, and he was a liar. Neither of these men were folk heroes. They were criminals. It may be interesting to study about their cases, but don't lose track of the fact that in the case of the Cooper skyjacking, he seems to have emotionally destroyed the flight attendant Tina Mucklow. And nobody on the flight crews, or in the case of McCoy's skyjacking, where some of the passengers knew that he was skyjacking the plane, are going to come away from those incidents with positive experience. And then after Mr. Hancock's long message, he sent another one refining his comments, saying that I was a world-class idiot and a bad liar. And I've pointed out in the previous video that I did concerning his comments that if I'm going to be an idiot, then being a world-class idiot is probably being better than a 2-bit idiot. I don't know where he's coming up with some of these contentions about me. But when you do videos on any subject, you need to have a thick skin. It doesn't matter what the subject of the video is. Go and look at almost any video, and often there are just dozens of trolls leaving comments. And quite frankly, there are people who are experiencing mental illness who are on the internet and watching videos and leaving poorly worded, rambling messages full of misspellings. So rather than being offended by the few people that leave such messages, I'm slightly bemused, and it provides me something to discuss in my Q&As. Again, as I pointed out, I tell you where I'm coming from. I tell you what I believe about the case. I admit that I may be wrong about my hypothesis. On occasion, I may be wrong here and there on particular facts. And if I am, I put up the person's comments correcting me, and I admit I was wrong. I clearly state that my channel is not currently monetized, but that's what I'm working towards, and I'm doing so by trying to provide as accurate information as possible so that I become a well-respected authority in the different subjects that I talk about. And I admit that even though I'm becoming an authority by virtue of creating these videos, I don't consider myself to be an expert. I probably know more about the case than 99% of the people out on the street, but within the Cooper community, probably 75% of you know more about it than I do. And while I admit that I would like to monetize this channel, I also point out that the hours of work that I put in almost every day to make videos on this and other subjects would likely result in no more than about $71 a month in income from my channel if I was monetized. So if you think that I'm making up to $71 a month creating biased propaganda videos is my motivation, then I'm probably not going to convince you otherwise. So this has gotten extremely long, much longer than I thought, but I like to go into clear detail when I'm talking about these things rather than just basic talking points that don't have much evidence behind them. If you've made it this far, I do sincerely appreciate it. Again, I would really like it if you hit that subscribe button, and please do leave a comment, and hopefully you'll click the like button on this and check out my other videos. If you have any interest in this case, obviously I reference a lot of other videos that I've done. I go into more detail in those, into specifics about the money that was found on the riverbank, or issues concerning the tie, or many other topics, so please check those out. Thanks again for viewing.